Have you ever noticed something strange, yet couldn't quite put your finger on it? This is exactly how our protagonist, John, began to feel about his wife, Sarah. There was something off in her behaviour that he just couldn't shake off. Sarah, who was usually punctual, began coming home late from work more often than not. The scent of an unfamiliar cologne clung to her clothes, a scent that was not John's. Her phone, which used to lie around the house, was now always within her reach. She would sneak off to take calls, her hushed whispers setting off alarm bells in John's mind. These weren't the habits of the Sarah he knew, the Sarah he had married. This Sarah was different, more elusive. It was as if she was hiding something that John was determined to uncover. And so the seeds of doubt were sown in John's mind. Oh, what do you do when doubt starts to consume you? This was the question that began to haunt John's every waking moment. Unable to dismiss the nagging feeling that something was amiss, he decided to start an investigation of his own. His love for Sarah was undeniable, but the unknown was gnawing at him, threatening to swallow his sanity. The first step was observation, a quiet, careful study of Sarah's habits. The late nights and early mornings that had once been shared were now hers alone. The scent of an unfamiliar cologne began to linger in their shared spaces, a foreign presence that seemed to mock him. And then there were the secretive phone habits, the hushed conversations, the quick end of calls as he entered the room. These were the signs that pushed him further down the rabbit hole of suspicion. It wasn't just the intangible signs that bothered him, though. Sarah had started to drape herself in new clothes, clothes that he hadn't seen before, clothes that he hadn't bought for her. The soft fabrics and bold colours were so unlike her usual style, it was as if he was looking at a stranger. And then there was the jewellery, delicate pieces of gold and silver that adorned her neck and wrists. Each piece was a silent testament to his growing fears, a tangible sign of a possible betrayal. But the most damning of all was the change in her. The woman he knew was lively, full of laughter and light. Now she seemed distant, her eyes holding a certain coldness that he couldn't understand. It was as if a veil had descended, hiding the woman he loved and replacing her with someone he barely recognized. As the days turned into weeks, the evidence began to pile up, each piece adding fuel to the fire of his suspicions. He couldn't ignore it any longer. The woman he loved was slipping away, and he had to find out why. With every passing day, John's suspicions only grew stronger. Have you ever seen something that you wish you hadn't? John began to ask himself this question as his days turned into nights, consumed by a new obsession. It began as an innocent observation, an unfamiliar car, a sleek black beast that seemed to lurk around every corner. A constant presence in his periphery. It was everywhere Sarah went, and it began to gnaw at him. First, he noticed it at her office. Nestled among the sea of sedans and SUVs, it stood out like a raven in a flock of pigeons. John didn't think much of it at first. After all, it was just a car in a parking lot. But then it started showing up elsewhere. The grocery store was the next sighting. Amidst the hustle and bustle of the midweek grocery run, there it was, that same dark silhouette, parked just a few rows away from Sarah's car. John's heart skipped a beat. A coincidence, he thought, trying to shake off the growing unease. But then the car started appearing near their home. This was no longer mere coincidence. It was as if the car had a mind of its own, shadowing Sarah's every move. The sight of it sent chills down John's spine. He could feel his pulse quicken, his mind racing with endless questions. Who was behind the wheel of this car? What did they want with Sarah? Dread began to fill his thoughts, each sighting of the car amplifying his fears. The unfamiliar car was like a constant spectre, an ominous symbol of the unknown. It was a reminder of his suspicions, a manifestation of his doubts. It was a puzzle piece that didn't fit, a thorn in his side. Every glimpse of it was a stab of anxiety, a silent confirmation of his worst fears. The unfamiliar car was like a ghost, haunting John's every waking moment. As he lay awake at night, the image of the car burned in his mind, a beacon of uncertainty in the darkness of his suspicions. What would you do if your darkest nightmares turned into reality? This was the question haunting John throughout the night as he sat by himself in his vehicle, draped in the veil of night. The evening cold was creeping into his car, but it was the cold dread of suspicion that had been eating away at his heart, turning his spirit to ice. On this particular night, John had made a resolution to confront his fears, to face the unseen. He had trailed Sarah, his wife, to a poorly illuminated parking lot, a place that seemed to harbour secrets within its shadows. The lot was nearly empty, with the exception of a few vehicles, one of which was eerily familiar. The strange car, the one that had been haunting his dreams and waking hours alike. His heart pounded fiercely, matching the rhythm of his unease. He observed as Sarah stepped out of her car, her figure outlined by the distant streetlights. She didn't glance back, didn't falter as she advanced towards the foreign car. The car door swung open and a man emerged, an faceless entity, a spectre that had abruptly taken on human form. In the frosty silence of the night, John watched as the two figures came together, their shadows blending into one. Then, as if time had slowed to a crawl, he saw them exchange a soulful, intense kiss. A sight that played out like a brutal, gut-wrenching dance of treachery. His world, once abundant with love and trust, crumbled around him, supplanted by the brutal truth of dishonesty. His heart, once aflame with love, was now a frozen desert of pain and betrayal. His worst nightmares weren't just realized. They were carved into his spirit, leaving a wound that would forever remain unhealed. In that moment, John felt his universe collapsing around him. The sound of their laughter, the vision of their shared passion, were all a harsh reminder of what he had lost. His world wasn't just broken, it was obliterated, leaving him alone in the wreckage of what was once a beautiful love saga. How do you confront someone who has betrayed your trust? Imagine a storm brewing inside you, a tempest of emotions, anger, pain, betrayal. That's what John felt as he stood before Sarah and the unfamiliar man from the parking lot. "Who is he, Sarah?" he demanded, his voice echoing in the stillness of the night. The words hung heavy in the air, like a storm cloud ready to unleash its fury. Sarah's eyes widened in shock, her face as pale as moonlight. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. It was as if she was a deer caught in the headlights, frozen and unable to move. And then there was the man, the unfamiliar figure who was the catalyst to this confrontation. He looked at John, then at Sarah, and then made a move to leave. But John was relentless. "Where do you think you're going?" he barked, his words like a whip cracking in the air. The man paused, his hand frozen on the car door handle. Accusations flew like arrows in the dark, each one hitting its mark. John was relentless, his words sharp and cutting. He demanded answers and he wouldn't leave until he got them. Sarah, once the picture of innocence, now looked like a cornered animal. Her eyes darted between John and the man, her lips quivering as she tried to form words. I can explain," she stuttered, her voice barely a whisper. But could she really? Could she explain the nights of deceit, the lies that had been spun, the trust that had been shattered? In the face of confrontation, the truth has a way of revealing itself. It's like a Pandora's box that, once opened, can't be closed again. And as John stood there, his heart pounding in his chest, he knew one thing for certain. The truth once revealed can't be hidden again. How do you move on from betrayal? A question that haunted every waking moment of John's life following the shocking revelation. The aftermath of the confrontation was far from peaceful. The once harmonious household of John and Sarah was now a battleground of broken trust and shattered dreams. The relationship that was once filled with laughter and shared secrets was now strained, teetering on the edge of collapse. They both tried to work through the rubble of their relationship, but the foundation had been cracked. Sarah, once the light of John's life, was now a shadow of her former self, struggling to make amends for her actions. John found himself stuck in a loop of confusion and anger. How could he forgive her? But then again, how could he not? Their shared memories, their dreams, their love, wasn't it worth fighting for? But the sting of betrayal was too raw, too fresh. With every attempt to bridge the gap, the chasm only seemed to widen. Sarah, on the other hand, was caught in her own whirlpool of guilt and regret. She knew she had made a grave mistake, one that could potentially cost her the love of her life. She tried to reach out to John, tried to heal the wounds she had caused, but the trust that was once there seemed to have evaporated, leaving behind a void that was too vast to fill. As the days turned into weeks, the tension only grew. Conversations were replaced with silence, laughter with tears, and love with resentment. Both were lost in their own labyrinth of thoughts, trying to find a way out, but only getting more entangled in the web of their shattered relationship. In the end, the truth had set them free, but at a great cost. The cost of a love that was once pure and untainted, now stained with the ink of betrayal. The cost of a trust that was once unbreakable, now shattered into a million pieces. The cost of a dream that was once shared, now a distant memory. Can a broken heart ever truly heal? This is the question that echoes in John's mind as he navigates the choppy waters of heartbreak and betrayal. The sting of Sarah's infidelity still lingers, a bitter aftertaste that taints every memory, every shared smile, every whispered "I love you." But as the saying goes, sometimes things fall apart, so better things can fall together. John and Sarah make the painful decision to part ways. It's a choice that neither of them take lightly, a heart-wrenching conclusion to a story that had once been filled with love and laughter. It's like ripping off a band-aid, a sharp, swift pain that eventually gives way to a dull ache. In the quiet solitude of his thoughts, John finds a strange sense of peace. No longer is he bound by the chains of uncertainty, no longer is he haunted by the spectre of Sarah's deceit. He's free from the web of lies that had ensnared him, free to find happiness once more. It's a bittersweet freedom, one that comes at the cost of a love lost, but it's freedom nonetheless. As the days turn into weeks and the weeks into months, John finds strength in his solitude. He takes up painting, a hobby he had once loved but had put aside for Sarah. He finds solace in the stroke of the brush, the blending of colors, the creation of something beautiful from nothing. He takes long walks in the park, the crunch of leaves under his feet a comforting reminder that life goes on, that the world keeps turning no matter how much your heart aches. He finds solace in the rhythm of life, in the quiet resilience of nature. And so, John found himself alone, but at peace. The mystery had been solved, but the heartache would take time to heal. The road to recovery is long and winding, filled with obstacles and setbacks. But John knows he'll make it through. After all, time heals all wounds, and John has nothing but time.